and
Exactly.
all that stuff. You could just work.
That's why we're building the light rail, so
Yeah.
they'll have reliable. That is the reliable transportation. So those kind of things that we need to look at.
Not to cut off our conversation, but I think we're needing to actually kick off the meeting so that we can stream it live to the public and make it kind of official. We have just a few community members with us tonight. It's looking like I see like Ellis and Ken and others on the line, as well as those that have already introduced themselves. I did get a bunch of emails just kind of late in the day of people that have conflicts. So maybe we're a small group today, but I think we have some of our key folks to start talking about anti-displacement. So we're gonna officially, Jason, if it's cool, start streaming and recording, and I'll turn it over to you to call the meeting to order and get us to kind of the first agenda item of just approving the minutes and doing the business so we can get into discussion.
Yep. Sounds good. Yep. So thanks everyone for joining the meeting. Good to have you all in attendance. We need to make a motion. Hopefully you were able to look at the summary from the last meeting. So can I ask for a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
And then can I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay. So minutes are approved. So kind of getting to our meeting for this evening. I guess, before we get started, Sophia, I wanted to just like take a moment because I know last time we've had a couple of meetings for a little while where there wasn't a ton of new information, or at least, we earlier in the year, we had some big stuff that we wanted to get through. Then we didn't have meetings for a little bit. Anyway, last meeting had a lot of new information, and just because we were all getting it in the last meeting, I wanted to just take a second we wanted to take a second and just make sure that, we gave some space to address if there were updates or additional comments from the last meeting and the information that we received, to just spend a few minutes on that really quickly. So let's start there.
So Jason, what information did we receive?
So the last meeting was talking about the changes along the line at North Memorial, the Bass Lake Road. We talked about CURA, so they're here to join us on this call. What else did we talk about, Sophia? I should know off the top of my head, but I don't.
I think the big ones were just kind of the technical updates in Robbinsdale about North Memorial
and the changes
Hospital.
in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Yeah. So Robbinsdale, Crystal, a little bit of an overview of where we're at with Minneapolis, and then the discussion around CURA. So did anybody I mean, you don't have to have anything to follow up on, but if there was from our last meeting, I just wanted to give us some time to talk about it quickly. Nope. Okay. So with that, let's move into our agenda for this month, which, I mean, that meeting was only a couple weeks ago. So it's like we're rolling through now. We got it down. I guess Sophia, do you want to help with the introduction on the CURA team?
Yes, on the call tonight, and I'll turn it over to him. And see, Terrence, let me know if you want me to. I pulled up your presentation, so if you want me to share it, so you don't have to do presenter mode, just let me know. But we have C. Terrence Anderson with us. He'll do a full introduction of his title and his role at CURA. But just really glad to have him here, and we'll hear a little bit of kind of the work they do and their strategies and what to expect, and have plenty of time for discussion with them coming up. So C. Terrence, take it away.
Right on. Well, it's good to be with all of you tonight. I preemptively apologize. I have a 3 and a 1-year-old who probably didn't get enough of a nap at daycare, so you may hear or see them at some point tonight. The joys of work from home life in the context of a pandemic, but otherwise, I'm really excited to be here to talk about the work that we are queued up to do around the Blue Line. I'm a resident within the corridor itself. I live in North Minneapolis, and so I'm thinking about and I think experiencing probably a lot of the same things that probably brought a lot of you here to the project. And so just to have that sort of close relationship to the project, as well as sort of aligned with our expertise at CURA, I think makes this a special opportunity. I think, Sophia, yeah, I am, WebEx is what I was saying this the other day. I don't use it that much. I haven't used that much over the pandemic, so I'm like the least adept at using this. So I think it'd be great, Sophia, if you can do the presentation. I did provide, and I'm guessing, and I'm thinking Sophia will send out this presentation as well as our full proposal. So this presentation is just sort of a breakdown of the high points of what's in our full proposal. But I think Sophia will probably send out the full proposal if folks want to read it word for word, because there's definitely more details in there than will be fully in this presentation. Also I think what will be mailed to you is our schedule as we provided. And so within the context of the proposal. So definitely take a look at those things, but knowing that everybody wants to read tens of page proposal, prepared this presentation. Just to check on time, how much time do I have to present, just to make sure I'm navigating time well?
You have a good hour or so.
Okay.
For that in discussion. The committee meeting goes till 8. We don't have to go till 8. Sometimes we go over. But the main part of the conversation is kind of starting to talk about our anti-displacement stuff.
Cool.
We will have a little bit of time to have Dan talk about some of the project criteria stuff, but we can fit that in at the end. So feel free. You have definitely enough time to go through your stuff.
Okay, cool, great. So I have a lot of stuff in here, and I'm trying to go a level deeper than the sort of the flyover view. And so I'm hoping that, committee members, y'all ask as many questions as you like. And know too that the preemptive approach to this is co-creation along with both members of different communities, the new anti-displacement work group, which I'll talk about, and of course members in community. And I'll sort of flesh in where those points are, but please, I think I really want to hear from y'all. Is this really centering, getting to a conversation that y'all want to have so that you can make the recommendations that you want to make around anti-displacement and the Blue Line extension? So maybe we can jump in, we'll just jump into some of these things, but please, all the feedback, all the commentary is great. So to briefly introduce me, my name is C. Terrence Anderson. I'm the Director of Community Programs and Community-Based Research at CURA, which is the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, which is a public policy research center at the University of Minnesota. My own background is actually in transportation planning, so I used to work with Sophia and Dan at the Met Council. I did community engagement there, mostly around the C line and the D line, which hopefully y'all have ridden and have seen. And so sort of this transitway development aspect of things, I have some familiarity. I was a formal transportation planner before that in Wisconsin, and then I was the equity manager at the Met Council. I don't know, I'm in like the 4th iteration of my career, having fun. We'll see what happens for the 5th and 6th one. But the background really academically, or sort of my research interest, really centers in the ethics of urban planning, critical race theory, or sort of like what is sort of the racial aspects of policy and history, and environmental justice. So those kind of 3 I kind of have morphed over in my career into what is the ethics of urban planning? How do we sort of build cities that are just? How do we build cities that are responsive to historical wrongs? So, I think in a lot of ways, this is exactly the type of work that I've been queuing up to do in my career. And I think CURA, that's essentially the basis of who CURA is as well. We are a public policy research center that was founded in 1968. The last time the Twin Cities, Minneapolis in particular, had racial-related uprisings around racialized policies. So this is kind of a roundabout year for us to kind of come back into our sort of original mission and again, this project really fits in line with our core interests. I'll kind of dig into some of like our relevant work around this particular sphere just a little bit in the presentation, but just kind of wanted to give that. So to fully know who's on all of the project, it's myself, Dr. Brittany Lewis, and Ed Getz, who are kind of the three co-leads, with me sort of being the primary lead from CURA. Dr. Lewis is a senior research associate at CURA, kind of a lot of her work around evictions, our anti-displacement and gentrification study from 2017 was co-led by her on the qualitative side, which we'll talk about sort of what qualitative side means, and Dr. Ed Getz, who's the executive director of CURA, who led the quantitative side. So they'll be joining as part of this project. There is Ned Wick-Moore, who is one of our organizers on staff, who works alongside Malik Culturebaz in our neighborhood leadership and organizing program. So they really center around building leadership, supporting organizing that's happening in the context of neighborhoods in the Twin Cities and beyond. Jeff Matson, who is our community GIS program manager. Essentially what he does when community has a question or is looking for data that needs to be mapped, he's kind of the guy that goes to doing those things. Kristen Murray, who leads our public policy design lab, where we use art as a practice to deconstruct, demystify, give imagination, make more accessible complex policy. So we'll be bringing in some aspects of the public policy design lab into this work. Our newest doctor, Dr. Tony Damian, who just received his PhD at the University of Minnesota, who also joined in our anti-gentrification work and is going to continue to do that. We're joined by two consultants from Allison Bell from Bellwether Consulting and Margaret Kaplan from Housing Justice Center. So Allison Bell has a lot of history around transportation planning and specifically transit-oriented development, but she's joining really on a project management side in the context of this work. And then Margaret Kaplan and the Housing Justice Center are sort of a policy and law experts around housing in Minnesota. So they do a lot of work in and around these issues. So I think together we have quite a powerful team to support y'all. That's what we're here for. We're not here to be the experts in front of community. I think we're here to be the experts alongside community and a host of resources to work alongside community so that y'all can create the best version of what you think anti-displacement investment and policy could look like in the context of the Blue Line Extension. So again, I'm a philosophy guy from the beginning, and so I can sort of tell you in detail, hey, we're going to research this. But I think what's really important is that y'all really understand the framework by which we're operating with at CURA. Because if there's questions there, like how are we operating, what sort of guides our overall work, what's the ethos that guides our work, I think that's really, really important. So I'm just going to spend a couple slides walking through that. Preeminent to our work, and I think you'll see this in more detail in the context of our full proposal if you sort of read CURA's website as well, is that we really centered around what we call our reparative justice framework. We used to call this our reparative equity framework, and I think it just has sort of morphed over time into sort of encapsulating more broadly this notion of caring and being in a community and sort of casting vision to what change in community might look like. And so there's really three parts to the approach of our work. One, we really focus on contextualizing our works in the context of what are the historic inequities that we are faced with. So if we're talking about displacement today, those forces aren't just created out of the blue line today or created out of the current paradigm. They're sort of created in the context of historical policy. And so to know who's vulnerable today, there's more to know than just who's vulnerable today. It's to know why folks might be vulnerable today. So if folks are vulnerable in housing, so what is the context in which one might be vulnerable in housing? And housing, what might be the policy and historical background to doing that? And so we spend a lot of our research and time working in community, contextualizing the context of inequity if we're sort of moving forward to a place in which there's more equity out of the places that we call home. And we center that along with the second part, which we call community-centered, which is that the people that are impacted by the negative things that are experiencing need to be at the forefront of imagining something different, right? So in some ways, I sort of like to not necessarily joke, but in a jokey sort of way, if I hurt you as an individual, who gets to decide what healing looks like between us two? Most folks would say the person that is harmed should get to decide what the healing looks like. And so in that context, it's not just governments that we're pointing toward to find solutions, but it's y'all, right? The people in community who are potentially negatively impacted by the context of this work. So we believe that y'all should be the front and center, not us, not anybody else, but it's really community who are going to be impacted that need to be at the front and center. And then lastly, to what we are sort of aspiring to in policy or aspiring to in investments, we hope that they are fully reparative. So to the extent that there might be historical inequities or that there are historical inequities that we're facing and responding to today, how do we equal our impact in what we find as a solution to what is causing the problem in the first place, right? So sometimes I like to joke, if I took your car, I lit it on fire and I kicked it into the Mississippi River, you'd be pretty upset, right? And as an ethicist, I'd say, hey, I want to make this right. And I say, here's a pair of shoes. You would be like, well, that's not good enough. A pair of shoes for a car is not equal in impact. So how do we get a car for a car, or a train for a train, or a train for a car? I don't know how we should describe it in the context of a light rail project. I don't want Dan to get me, but a light rail train for a car, how do we ensure that that's equal or perhaps more beneficial than what is creating the inequity? So what are the forces that are causing displacement need to be met in equal opposite with preventing displacement, I think is what it means in this context. So jumping to the next slide, we fit that ultimately within our theory of change. So why we're here with you, because I think certainly CURA could be the type of organization at the University of Minnesota that conducts research, publishes it in some journal that almost nobody reads, including us, or just going directly to government saying, hey, this is what we think, y'all should think about this. No, we come to wanting to partner with community because ultimately we believe that actionable research, so us doing research that's useful to people in community, so right, folks who are doing advocacy and organizing, folks like yourself who are showing up to a community advisory committee, in tandem lead to the best policy change possible that is actionable from that research and advocacy and organizing. So we sit in equal partnership with community in their advocacy, their experiences, what y'all bring into the room as experts. Together, I think makes a formidable body of knowledge and policy that fully repairs or that is as equal in impact to the forces that we're trying to counteract. So that's a big and very heady thing, but I think I just want to frame and be very transparent about that framing, because that sort of sets up how we do our research, who's involved within our research, and ultimately where our research is directed, right? It's of course directed at Hennepin County and the Met Council and the other governments along the line, but for the most part, we view it's directed at you and community, right? What gives you the resources and ability to speak with more agency about complex issues, such as displacement as a result of transit projects, right? Of a light rail project potentially. So differently from, I think, often is the model at the university, which we call the drop-in model of research. So instead of us sort of coming with our own questions and hypotheses and methods, dropping into community, y'all getting data information, and then heading back to the ivory tower at the university to make sense of what we heard and to deliver a report, right? We want to do something different, which is the next slide. What we call the live-in model of research. So we sit alongside y'all with tools, right? So organizing, mapping data, grant making, other technical assistance, training, research, along with y'all as community leaders to sort of come together to ask the questions, together to develop the methods, together to have a hypothesis and ultimately get the data and information together. And then together we make meaning of that. And I think in this form, y'all making a recommendation together that ultimately is a body of policy and investment to prevent displacement along the Blue Line corridor. So ultimately, we lead with what we call a community-based research approach. So I'm the director of community-based research. That's really what it means to live in sort of this model of working in community as a public policy research center at the University of Minnesota. I just want to pause there in case there's any questions about that approach, anything that might be y'all hearing is good, or anything that y'all might hear as like, well, tell me more about that. I just want to do a quick little pause on that.
I have a question really quick.
Sure.
Just around, I guess like the 2 slides back, like the first circle, but just the idea that the one before, or I guess this works too. Just, yeah. So when we're thinking about community and you're talking about, you know, negative impacts, and I feel like just in the work that we've done, there's a lot of different definitions or meanings of impact depending on who you're talking to. And so I know that, you know, there's a lot of work to do, and that's part of the research and everything, but what if there isn't like like an idea that everyone coalesces around and agrees, like, this is the answer, this is what's the positive impact, this is what the negative is. I feel like there's a lot of conflicting views of, like, especially within the context of light rail and adding this into our communities, that like some people think it's great, some people don't, some people think those changes are going to be amazing, some people think they're going to be very negative. It's like there's a lot of different ideas, and I guess my question is, like, how do you do this research, but what if there isn't like a common theme? It's all over the place.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for that, Jason. I think for one, it's very normal, and we experience it all the time in the context of our research, for people to have different elements or characteristics of a project that they care about more. I find that a lot of times, say when we've done anti-displacement research, say, which we were involved in the first Green Line between downtown St. Paul, the existing Green Line, not the one under construction. And some folks are really concerned about housing. Some people are really concerned about environmental justice. Other folks might, you know, there's of course a realm of issues that folks have. Most of the time, those things can coexist together, right? And so I think first, it's sort of discerning amongst those particular interests. You know, is that something that's conflicting with each other? Is it something that's coexistential as a concern that the group can care about? But the other aspect of it is, say that it is in conflict with it. So say two people really care about housing, but they have two very different views about what is good for housing or not, which is also very common. So I think it's, you know, in one level, like, you know, when I say the word equity, and if I went around this room and I said, hey, what's your definition of equity? Probably as many people as are in this room, probably most folks will have a slightly different definition. So we sort of realized over time that, hey, we're both talking about the color blue, but in the details, we're talking about a different shade of blue, right? And so when we get to that different shades of blue kind of conversation, what my experience is always go deeper, right? Because say if there's say like in the most, what often is renters versus landlords, right? Renters and landlords doesn't necessarily have to be this forever oppositional aspect of doing this work, or what might be equity in that conversation. But we might need to dig deeper to see, like, okay, what are the particularities about, let's say, for landlords that they need to care about, or for renters, what folks need to care about. And I guess I don't believe ultimately, I mean, you're going to get to policy disagreements, but again, it's for the committee in the community, like for y'all, for the anti-displacement work group, to take all that in and make the recommendation, right? It's not CURA that's going to be delivering a recommendation. It's going to be y'all in community to deliver the recommendation. And so my question would be, like, what are the things that y'all need to know to make a more clear decision about those particular issues? And maybe you might disagree at the end of the day, and it might be a majority vote sort of thing. But in the context of this work, right, y'all are going to make a recommendation, so y'all are going to have to coalesce around a similar definition of equity. I think our research, and we'll get to the research plan where it really details who's vulnerable in the context of this work, like who might be displaced, what are the businesses that might be displaced, what are the characteristics of those people. So I don't think we'll get into a gray area about that unless we just disagree from the beginning of, like, what are our assumptions about how to sort of discern who those people are, which that's something we're going to talk about. But our experience, and we're going to talk about this, we've done some research like this. I think we'll get a clear view about who's vulnerable, who's at risk, but y'all will have to parse through some deep things, and we'll have to come together about how to discern that really clearly for y'all to make the most clear recommendation that you can. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, right on.
I have a question for you, C. Terrence.
Sure.
And I mean, I've seen your work. I know one of the positive things about you is that you do a deep dive. That's not my concern. My concern is, and I've been on housing committees at the state and a whole bunch of other places with you. My concern is it's not going to happen. So whatever your recommendations are, which I've seen for the city and other entities, and the deep dive that you've done and the information you've provided, It never happens with the policymakers. They don't move forward with it. So my concern is not with you or the research that you're going to do or the results of your research. It's the implementation that's not going to happen. So what's your position on that? I mean, do you have an expectation from the Met Council in Hennepin County as far as your contractual agreement with them, or a verbal understanding as to what's going to happen or what won't happen, regardless of our recommendations?
Yeah, I hear that for sure, Catherine. Yeah, I mean, so I'll answer it in two ways. You know, in one way, like I said, I used to work with these folks, a lot of these folks, when I worked at the Met Council. I do, and I put my reputation on the line that I believe that these folks who we're doing this work with are things that I was talking about with them 5 years ago when I started at the Met Council. So I know verbally that there's an interest amongst, the project manager, among Sophia, like I know that there's an interest about this work and but here's the thing. At the end of the day, my word, my reputation, what they might say is not going to be the overstanding. It's not the system of accountability that you're talking about, right? And so I think in one way, of course, our worldview centers around empowering organizing to have power over a conversation that folks are having. So again, our work is directed to y'all to build power, build understanding, building shared analysis and community to sort of have that shared demand ultimately of the project. But it's in our final, in the outcomes of this project, and I'm just going to say, remember this when we get to this, we want to build a system of accountability mutual between the different governments at work and between the community partners who've been part of the project to say, what is our system for carrying this forward in order to that it's not just I deliver this recommendation, it disappears behind a black curtain, and then it reappears either as it happened or it doesn't happen without our input along the way. And so I think along with doing this research is we're going to be hopefully building a train of accountability. I'm just saying train. I would have said car since we're doing a train. We're building a train along the way. Is like, what does that mutual system of accountability once it leaves the end of CURA's process, right, or this process around anti-displacement that y'all feel trust in, feel a part of, feels like mutually continues to check the boxes like we were heard and y'all are working on it. And so that system's not built yet, but it's something that we intend to build along the way within this project, which I don't think is something that's been done before. And so we're going to see if it works and if it doesn't work. But hopefully at the end of the day, y'all will have some sense. We're thinking about also how, say when we're building I'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the anti-displacement work group. Often what I've seen in governments is that they'll have, say, a CAC. Y'all will sort of talk in a room amongst each other for a number of months, and then you'll deliver a recommendation, and then governments receive those recommendations and they say that, I don't know about this, I don't know about this, I don't know about this. Because they weren't along for the journey along the way to say, what were the different discussions? They weren't sort of part of the process of y'all getting to the recommendation. So one thing that we're thinking about is not as being formal members of the anti-displacement work group, but what does it look like for these different governments to sit alongside the whole way, to have those conversations, not at the end of the process, but during the process, to hash out where there might be disagreements or see things differently, so that when we get to the end of it, there is this mutual idea between governments, between the community members that are on this committee and the new anti-displacement work group, and so that it's not a mystery once the recommendation is delivered, right? You'll have some sense of where they're sitting. They'll have sense of where the recommendation is going to go before the recommendation is finalized as a way. So in theory, my thought around that is if we can bring folks along for the journey equally, as along with y'all, or sort of along with y'all as mutual partners to figure this out, right? Because they don't know this data yet either, right? They haven't looked at this data beforehand, so they're going to be seeing it for the first time too. So there's some things in the long ways, I can't guarantee it, but we're putting things along the way that hopefully lead to that, building that mutual trust between partners.
It's not meant to disparage any of the folks on the team, because I think they're with us. They just don't have any power. They can't do anything.
Right.
So, Catherine, I just want to drill down one little bit further. Are you saying skepticism over the ability to deliver on recommendations made by the anti-displacement working group, or the ability or skepticism about being able to deliver the project in itself?
No, I'm thinking of the recommendations that's coming out of the
Sure.
displacement group, as well as recommendations coming out of the CAC. So we'll make recommendations that
Sure.
relate to anti-displacement and in other areas. So yes, I
mean, the
believe
only
you
thing,
guys will
the only
carry
thing I would add to that, Catherine, to what C. Terrence said, is that, I mean, unless I'm being led down the wrong path and Sophia's being led down the wrong path, we have the full and committed support of county board, Met Council members, Met Council chair, local city councils along here to want to pull a group together to develop recommendations that they can then implement. Now, that doesn't guarantee they're going to get implemented. I get that.
Right.
But we are going to advocate on their behalf. And I think we're not doing this as and I've said this many times, let's check the box, go off, make sure we do some studies, put some things in a 3-ring binder, bring it forward and say, hey, look at what we did. No, we're doing this so that this project is more successful than any project could be, because we're actually implementing the things that the community helps build up and advance. So I will be equally, disappointed if we're unable to implement, many of the things that come out of the working group, because we have formed this with the idea that we really wanted to make change.
No, I believe that, but it's more than disappointment for my community. We'll be impacted in multiple ways.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
I believe you guys are on our side. I am skeptical about some of the recommendations we might make that don't necessarily coincide with management, that they're not going to make their way. So no issues with this team, but we'll see.
You gotta see it.
Yeah, and Catherine, I'll just add to one. I feel like I need to put my personal commitment out there, even though I know I'm not the policymakers, that both Dan and I and Sam and others on the project management team, I mean, we believe in this very much and feel, C. Terrence kind of said, I'm putting myself out there a little bit too. We feel the same way, right? Like if we get to a place where there's not actionable solutions and people aren't moving forward with it, I mean, we'll push for that too, right? So especially when it comes to things that are associated with the project delivery itself, the parts that we might have a lot more control over, right? A little bit. So yes, you can't offer assurances until a process plays out and you see them instead of talking about them. But I just do want you to know that some of that coalition building, the getting our partners on board, moving forward together, is very much what we want to work on.
I believe that.
Well, we'll see ultimately, right, Catherine? That's the old adage. But I believe them, and so hopefully we will see it. So just to jump, I'm going to keep running through just because I want to make sure y'all see everything as much as possible, knowing that this isn't the last conversation we're going to have, and I'm sure there's some clear places where I want to come back and have deeper conversations. So keep jumping. So ultimately, right here, yep. Ultimately, this isn't CURA's first. This is our first foray into understanding gentrification and displacement. So I know Dan is going to jump in and say, hey, we specifically are talking about displacement, right? And that is 100% true. This just happens to be the graphic that I like to discuss gentrification and displacement, and we sort of talk about those things as often together. But I think what Ed would say, who did this research, you don't need gentrification for displacement to exist. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to talk about this slide. So this came from our work in 2017, where we sort of mapped what are the existing and planned transit investments along with the areas that have that were gentrified between 2000 and 2015. And of course, you can see, I think y'all know where the blue line extension is to North Minneapolis on the left hand of your screen. It's a different alignment than is currently there because things changed from 2015, as of course y'all know, as where it is now. Of course, you can see the existing C line there in that dark gold. And I just recall my time working, at Metro Transit, working on the C line. I think I met Catherine. I think we met me doing C line outreach.
Mhm.
And I remember going into community and say, hey, this is a great thing. The C line's coming. And folks like Catherine were like, yeah, but is this going to be pushing us out of our houses? And I'm just thinking about the sort of the duality, like to what you were saying earlier, Jason. People might view two things different, right? The Met Council still, and I think it's right for them to talk about these transit investments as projects that are advancing equity, but it was also true that folks in community saw it as folks that might be advancing gentrification and displacement. And so I bring this slide up both because we've done this research, we've been in conversation with the community for a long time about this, right? And we're used to sort of where that divergence might be within the context of this issue. And again, we're going to bring not just this research, we're doing a similar project in the suburbs. So in Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center, we're doing the same study here right now, led by Dr. Lewis. And we've done other work within Robbinsdale and Crystal as well. And so of course, there is a history here, right? People aren't just walking in today like, hey, the blue line, I never heard it. Like most folks are like, this has been a conversation for a long time. And so we're holding, not just starting from zero for most people, we're starting within a legacy of a project that's existed for a long time. And this notion of displacement and gentrification, we're going to be specifically focusing on displacement in the context of this work, is not new to this community. And we bring all that within the context of our work today. Going to the next slide. So I think, so the next slide is, of course, one of the things that the RFP asked for, and I'm sure you're all aware, is the formation of what's called the Anti-Displacement Work Group. So to my knowledge, I've just heard that there may be folks from this community, and I've already heard from a lot of folks in community who want to be part of this group. But I think we need to decide together what it looks like to put that group together. And what I mean by that is, of course, CURA, I have a lot of relationships within this community, right? But I don't think it would be right for me to just be like, hey, let me tap you on the shoulder, let me tap you on the shoulder, let me tap you on the shoulder. Okay, now we've got 15 members, right? I don't think anybody would buy into a process such as that. So one of the things that I'm asking y'all, and maybe you can think about this and get back to me, or we can, of course, talk about it right now. What do y'all want to see as in terms of the process and the formation of that group? Because what's important to me is that y'all see that as a very valid, transparent group that will be, sort of accountable to what y'all have envisioned around this anti-displacement work up to this point. I've heard that members from this group and some of the other advisory committees may want to be in that group. I do want to communicate that just like I'm coming to y'all today to talk about this work, I'll be coming back to this group all the time to talk about the same things that we talk about in the anti-displacement work group. So to think about, is there people who are not involved in the current advisory committees that should be part of this group? Should there be some members from the advisory committee that should be part of the group? I'm not making a call. There has not been a call made about how to form for the formation of that group. But just to pause for a second in case anybody has already thought about how the process for forming that group should be, or anything like that. Of course, you don't have to say anything right now. We can talk about it offline as well. And if y'all just need some time to think about it too. But just to pause in case anybody has any thoughts.
Well, I think you should at least have someone who's already been displaced.
Yeah,
so someone
sure.
with actual experience with the situation, and someone who's homeless. So not just our elite CAT group, but people who are actually in the trenches on the ground, who are feeling the ramifications of the blue line already. And then others who are fearful, who are in the path of displacement. And that could be a regular citizen, a business owner, landowner, property owner.
Thank you. I hear that for sure.
Just off the top, but I'm sure others will come up with more recommendation.
Do you have a sense of how many people from each community will be included? Like, is there a number? Is it a representative number, a percentage or something? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, definitely there will be members from each of the different. You're talking about the different cities that are along the line. So Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park. So there certainly should be representative of each of those different areas. We haven't say created a stipulation already that there needs to be say a population proportional. But I obviously think that it probably should be somewhat population proportional. There should be both residents and business folks, particularly those who are vulnerable, or as Catherine said, have already been displaced from the corridor. And so I think those characteristics should be there. I mean, if you want to make a recommendation that it should be population proportional, that's exactly what I'm hoping to hear.
I think I'm more curious about directionally. Is this 100 people in this group? Is it 10 people in this group? Is it?
So I think, and Sophia, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the thinking was it'd be around 15 to 20. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, so a size that's a true working group, I think, Jason, enough that you can have a meeting and everybody can talk and get into it, and enough people that you have enough voices represented. And obviously that, again, see Terrence talked about, room for discussion, but functional, I think, is maybe one of the key considerations.
Yeah, not 100. There will be its own public process and community for 100 people to show up. But yeah, I don't think. Yeah,
and maybe there's some
breakout a few people
groups, guys. Maybe there's some subgroups. Maybe there's some breakout groups. Maybe there's some subspecialty groups. I mean, high level of participation is wonderful, but it can't also be managed in a committee of 50. So that's tough.
So see, Terrence, I'm not sure if it should be part of the group, but I'm somewhat of a realist, so I believe that there's going to be some level of displacement regardless of what we do. So I would love to see you coordinate or talk to either realtors or someone to where these people going to go. If it's temporary, where they have to move because of construction, or it's more permanent, or they are moved in anticipation of new housing that's going to be built, and they'll have the opportunity to move back, but somehow or another to tap into what options are available to people who will be displaced, and I guess determine whether or not they do want to come back or whatever.
Sure. I don't want to say, folks, they're definitely gonna. I hear you. As hard as it is to swallow that, I hear what you're saying, and I can understand that.
In my mind, just thinking through that, since there's only going to be a handful of people from each community, even if there's 5 from Minneapolis and 3 from Crystal and 3 from Robbinsdale or whatever it ends up being, it's not like it's going to be 15 people from each community. To whoever we decide, or however we decide on those participants, to also maybe set the expectation that they're going to need to pull in that they would have the access to pull in other resources or bring in other stakeholders that they would then represent those opinions, as opposed to I'm an individual member of this cohort, and I just want to make sure that if there's somebody that's included, that they also are knowing that they're going to need to talk to businesses, that they're going to need to talk to different communities within a city or whatever it is, and it isn't just okay, you're here now and that's it.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, I love that point. There's a similar point made by one of the business advisory committee members when I talked to them on Tuesday. Yes, I view it that way, that we're almost, our methodology kind of centers around organizing. So to the extent that we know that y'all are going to take it back into your community amongst your constituencies of folks, and developing information and materials that you can do that, but also not leaving the details off the table so that folks don't really know the full story of what's going on. So we're definitely thinking about that. And we heard that from another BAC member, so that will definitely be part of the consideration. And that includes being upfront about the commitment that it's going to be, right? It's not just showing up for a 2-hour meeting and that's the end of it, right? There's going to be stuff in between meetings, and going to actually talk to folks that are in that community or in that representation. So I hear that for sure. It's a great point, or point well taken. Well, y'all think about it and come back to me. I know we're coming up to the hour, so I just want to keep jumping to the next things. We're going to be talking for the next 18 months about all this in much more detail. So yeah.
Feel free if this takes a tiny bit over the hour. This is the main topic, so don't worry.
Okay. Well, just to jump to the next one. So I just wanted to put this on there because, oftentimes if I say go speak around the country and folks are like, hey, what does equitable decision making mean? So I just took this slide from a bunch of presentations that I give, and I didn't change the words, knowing that we're going to have to sort of adapt it to what it means in the context of this project. So these are what I'm thinking about. So to what you're saying, Jason and Catherine, part of this is we're not trying to simplify this very complex thing to the point where y'all don't actually have agency to speak powerfully into this issue on anti-displacement. So we're really thinking about, we're centered around building your capacity, community's capacity to understand this issue and its complexity, right? Because that's ultimately what it's going to take if you don't know an aspect of how to do this thing. If you leave this process in your recommendations and it doesn't fit Minnesota law or Minneapolis law or Hennepin County law, right? That's a problem. That left your ability, that leaves away your ability to really make a recommendation that is ready to be implemented and that it is possible. So we really want to make sure that in these 18 months, we're not just moving through it and say hey, there's this big problem. We think this might work. We want to know specifically, is the recommendation meet the complexity of what we're getting to? Ultimately, what we view, and this kind of goes again back to what you said, Jason, we view our work as resourcing you and community organizations to do organizing work for projects and beyond this project. So it's not just about delivering a body of knowledge and research and resources. Of course, we're focused on anti-displacement within the blue line, but hopefully this is also knowledge that can sort of transcend this project and makes y'all better advocates around this project too. So we're holding that as not just extracting from y'all, but hopefully building these lifelong resources and around this work that makes you more effective too, right? So we're not limiting you just in the context of this project. We're thinking about, right, if we as experts, and it will oftentimes take us months to do the research and understand something, we're not just going to come and give you 2 hours to understand what took us, people with PhDs and other stuff, and this folks, months to understand and give y'all 2 hours to understand in a comment, right? We are building this process knowing it's going to take time to really dig through all these things and get to that level of complexity that ultimately gives y'all the agency to do things you want. So that's our promise to you, right? We're building time within our schedule. It's not fully scheduled out. There's months, there's not fully scheduled meetings. We're leaving a lot of time for us to step back, for y'all to ask more questions or deliver something else that we're not planning on so you can really fully understand these things. So it's taking y'all whatever amount of time it needs to sort of get to what you need to get to. And then, of course, as we know, oftentimes if anybody's gone to a public meeting, you might say something that particular government does not have any responsibility for. I know Dan and Sophia have experienced that all the time, right? And so we're thinking about how do we bring those other governments, those other philanthropy, right, business, whoever it is, Catherine, you said a really good example where folks might be displaced to what might be the interest of those communities. And so where it might be ideas go beyond the scope of the project, we're not saying it's going to be dealt with within this project, but we are saying that we're not going to leave those things hanging for them not to be addressed and therefore it being a dead end what you commit to in this project, right? We know that y'all care for things beyond this project that naturally bleed from working on this work. We're not just going to leave those things there. We're going to carefully consider them and move them to places where folks who do have power, right? So this isn't just a black hole of do what we want about this project and that's the end of it too. So I just wanted to put those things out front. Research plan. We're getting into the more specific, I'm getting more specific over time. What do we actually plan to do? So we have put together essentially 6 separate research projects. So it's like, I know, so there's one research project, they're actually kind of 6 separate research projects that we think get to the type of information and lead to y'all making an implementable recommendation at the end of the day. So one of those, of course, starts with what we call a literature review. What are folks doing around the country about anti-displacement anyways, right? Regardless of whether being within the context of transit or not, because we know that displacement is already occurring in this community, whether transit exists there or not, right? So what are all of those things that folks are doing? So y'all can see locally, y'all can see nationally, right? There's no dearth of information around that. That actually takes more time than you think it does, but we'll do that. We'll also do a case study of the existing blue, green and blue lines and their effects on displacement of residents and businesses. So that includes both the existing blue line and green line, but also the green line extension that's currently being built. So what are the lessons from those places, right? There's a lot we can learn about our own community and not starting and pretending that we're starting from zero. We will do a thorough baseline study of the blue line extension corridor. So who are the people who live in the community? What are the businesses that are in the community? What are the vulnerabilities exist? If there is a displacement, where are those people being displaced to? Let's look around each of the different stations and the characters even in more detail. Y'all have a full view about, of course, y'all know this corridor, you live in this corridor, so I'm hoping this just affirms what y'all know already about this corridor into a deeper level. We'll do a needs assessment for investment in the corridor. So what is community saying? What is business community saying about what are the needs both during planning of the blue line, because we know folks are already thinking about what to do. Like say, for example, as soon as they announce whatever the new route for the blue line will be, right? Folks will already start thinking about, what's happening, like the effects will kind of already in place. So what are the needs in planning? What are the needs during construction, right? If you're on University Avenue during construction, it might have been kind of hard if you're a business, and that's a lesson learned that I know Met Council has already thought about. But what are those needs during that time? And then, of course, post-construction during operations, what are the needs to sort of get over whatever barriers might exist? We'll do a development of policy recommendations based on the findings in those studies 1 through 4, which we kind of view as another research study. So how do we make sense, make meaning out of all those inputs that we're already getting? And then 6, developing indicators for residents and business displacement along the blue line extension corridor as a means of monitoring impact over time. So, right, that's part of the accountability structure to what you're saying, Catherine, like, is what we're doing working, and how will we know if what we're doing is working, right? Not just be agnostic about the benefits once the recommendations are taken and implemented, but let's see them working in real time. And so we want to deliver a body of indicators. I'm gonna keep running. I know there's probably questions, but I'm just gonna keep running just because it kind of fleshes it out a little bit more. So going back to our worldview, contextualizing, community centering, and repairing, just like how do those things show up in the context of our work? So in the research and action plan, so recall what has already been said by community, BIPOC in particular, because we know those folks are particularly vulnerable to displacement along the corridor, that have been engaging on the blue line extension for years, in particular what they said they needed to ensure blue line extension benefits in existing residents, right? Folks have already said things when the project was almost built a couple years ago, right? So let's recall those things and center those things. Again, not pretending that we're starting from zero, in particular addressing harm that has already occurred as a result of blue line extension work, namely in Harrison and other parts of North Minneapolis. We want to detail the history of disinvestment and exclusion in marginalized communities along the planned blue line extension route. We want to study the existing green line and blue line planning, construction, and after operation impacts on vulnerable communities and populations as a case study for what can be expected to happen during blue line extension planning, construction, and operation. And last, in contextualization, conduct a demographic analysis of vulnerable populations, housing, and businesses along corridor that would need investment to protect. Right. So we want to contextualize this work. This is what when I said that before, this is what we mean by that in the context of this work. Jumping to the next slide, centering community. We want to connect the anti-displacement work group with organizing community around displacement issues, right? So this isn't the only group of people that we'll be talking to. Y'all aren't the only group of people that we'll be talking to. There's community who doesn't connect in that way. There's organizing that doesn't connect in this sort of formal process way with government. We don't want to ignore those things. We want to make sure we connect this work and y'all to what's happening in community. We want to set our research work as a capacity building tool for vulnerable community members to develop clear vision about what kind of anti-displacement investments and policies would best protect and uplift them. We want to convene the anti-displacement work group and y'all with other project stakeholders to build a shared analysis of the problem that exists, develop shared intent on how to address those issues, and expand the capacity for vulnerable community to have power over the vision of the blue line extension, right? So to what you were saying before, Jason, as much as we can build shared vision, as much as we can build shared analysis, that's what we're hoping to do. We probably will never get to 100% shared. If we can get to 90% or 95%, right, that'll be really good and gives us something really good to work for together. Reparative, we want to assist community residents, government staff, and others in developing an achievable vision to prevent displacement along the Blue Line Extension corridor. So what we said before, we have Housing Justice Center here because they know the laws and policies real well. Right? We, of course, we'll have the governments themselves here so that recommendation is something that is actionable, right? We keep using this word actionable. We don't want there to be mystery about, we want to know, I don't know if we can do this or not, or if we want to do this, then this state law is going to have to change. Like, we want y'all to know that in the recommendation at the time. So ultimately, that recommendation for how Hennepin County, the Met Council, and city governments can allocate investment and enact policy around the Blue Line Extension to prevent displacement, and a recommendation for how governments, foundations, and others can operationalize anti-displacement work internally. So we want to bring those folks along the way. We want to create accessible and commonly understandable materials for the complex work that the Anti-Displacement Work Group is doing to share with the general public, something that we were talking about just a minute before, Jason. We want to develop indicators for along the line to monitor signs for displacement. We want to advise and facilitate a structure of accountability as mutual between community residents, organizations, and relevant government agencies. Reparative. So all of this, the next slide I think is also an important slide. We've put forward a vision for what this work is, but we also expect that at the beginning of the research process, one of the first things we're going to do, we want to continue to collaborate with y'all, with community partners, to develop a more robust research agenda. So I know there are things that y'all are probably all thinking, and once again, read the full proposal, particularly that research section, because it details that research in a little bit more. That you're going to read things like, well, I need to know the answer to this question, or I need to know a little bit more about this before I can come back and make that recommendation. We want to hear those things because we're leaving room for more research to be done in our work. So really think about, what are those things that you need to know to fully understand what y'all are getting into, right? If you're not a transportation professional or a research professional, right? Whatever it is, take your time, think about those days, or we already know we're going to get into it and you're going to be like, well, thanks for presenting that. I need to know a little bit more about that too. So even later on, we're going to keep building this more robust research agenda to allow y'all to be fully capacitated to create an anti-displacement vision that matches your needs. In other words, there will likely be more to this research agenda as community identifies their needs to be full participants in the process. So if there's something missing, I knew it. Tell me what it is so we can add it and do that research on it.
Are you here now? Jason, you got it first, so go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear anything about funding sources for the businesses. Most of them are non-owners of the real estate where they reside. So there's a lot of funding out there and available through federal programs, and there's just this money everywhere. So I don't want to miss the immediate opportunity for them to take advantage of that. However, there are some barriers to the business owners along West Broadway and others. We've got a critic, okay.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
This was
We
gonna
got
happen.
another critic. That's fine.
You want to go to the bathroom upstairs? I'll with mommy, okay?
I don't need to.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I've had kids too.
Yeah.
They're a little louder, but anyway. So is there any immediate need that you can provide, or solutions or recommendations you can provide to our businesses? And a lot of them are almost at the beginning stages. I mean, they need help in areas from not being able to take advantage of certain loan programs because they don't have the right tax records. So, I mean, there's a lot of hand-holding that would need to be done that will impact whether or not they are displaced or have to leave or any other scenario. So is there an immediate charge to partner with organizations, you don't have to do it yourself, that can provide that grassroots hand-holding to our businesses and direct them toward some of the amazing funding that's out there and available to them right now?
Yeah, I love that. Well, it's definitely part of the research agenda now. But yeah, I think we thought about that in one way, at least in the context of philanthropy, especially locally, and having those folks at the table around this issue. But definitely, we'll add it to the research agenda. And yeah, when you say immediately, we mean like right now, not at the end of the research process.
Exactly. And I mean, I
Okay.
talked to Dan that 18 months is not enough, but we can talk about that. This should be ongoing until the last train rides to Target Center. So I'm saying this as 5-6 year project because it needs to be ongoing. I mean, this is not 18 months and you've gone off to the Bahamas or wherever you're going for a vacation. This is something that the community needs on an ongoing basis. So yeah,
And I
I'm
think
just
we
saying,
know the flavor, Catherine, the flavor and the scope of work that needs to be done will change over those 5 or 6 years. And so that'll be part of how we'll build in what needs to be different. I mean, it's good to talk about construction impacts right now, to recognize them, to know about them. But of course, they may be years away. And so we got to prepare for them. Then we got to be able to tackle them head on when we're there in construction.
Mhm. And some of these funding opportunities will bolster our business community along whichever corridor or both that might be selected.
Well, we think, I mean, see, Terrence, to Catherine's point, I mean, this is clearly well, it's great. It's great to come up with recommendations. And Dan, don't you have like hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on LRT? Sure. We can't use any of that money to do some of these recommendations. In some cases, the answer is no, we can't. And so where are these other funding sources? What between philanthropy and between other county and Met Council and local public agencies, where are these other spots? That'll be a big part of what the working group helps us with, is identify some of those. Then it'll be on us as government folks to go get them.
Right. I mean, you could have the entire corridor designated as a cultural corridor with coordination across the different cities for reciprocal businesses. So, I mean, I'd love to see them working hand in hand where I have a dress shop and Bob has shoes and someone else does hats and things like that, so that it's a robust economic ecosystem across the entire corridor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that for sure. Yeah, in some ways we are already sort of planning, just like some of our background thinking, which I think is more fleshed out in the context of the proposal. And we kind of think we know there's some things that community wants right now, like it's not going to wait till the end of 18 months, and so we're already having in our mind to do some of those things, and this is one of those things, right? So, yeah, and on top of everything that Dan said, I appreciate that. Taking to heart. We'll follow up very soon. Around that. So this slide is just a note about working alongside organizing communities. So just sort of a note around us that, we want to continue to partner with what's happening in community. Right? We're not solely just looking at what 15 to 20 members are saying, but like, we have a large goal of how many people to connect with in the context of our work, thousands of people, and we're serious about that. We will get to it. And so how do we meaningfully hear from that many people? And working with organizing in communities is a big part of that strategy. And convening a layers of folks to sort of get around immediate issues and future issues, or issues that we know are going to come to be dealt with in the future too. So just to jump to the next slide. Let's see. I don't remember what's next. So I think this is the last slide, actually. So our hopeful plan outcomes out of all this work is a research report that details displacement risk as a result of planning and constructing the Blue Line extension, and indicators that will alert Hennepin County and others to displacement, and recommendations for how, I think I butchered that a little bit, and how Hennepin County and others might mitigate risk for displacement as a result of the Blue Line extension completion. We are hoping for a developed constituency, both in community and government, namely Hennepin County and the Met Council, to do anti-displacement work. a recommended plan for Hennepin County investment, and policy to prevent displacement along Blue Line Extension Corridor, including a recommendation that addresses potential displacement of residents, a recommendation that addresses potential displacement of commercial businesses, and a recommendation that addresses displacement during planning, construction, and the long-term effects after line completion. A recommendation for Hennepin County, the Met Council, and city government's investment to address other negative externalities or negative impacts of the Blue Line, including a recommendation that addresses any residual concerns regarding transit connections, bicycle pedestrian connections, cultural preservation, and others to be identified by y'all and others. The guidance on implementation of recommendations for Hennepin County, the Met Council, and city governments. Is there another point? There's like a little writing. Okay. So there is a project. Oh, any questions about that? Does that sound like the right plan outcomes that we're trying to get to ultimately to y'all? Okay, give me some thumbs up, some nods. So I feel like we're on the right track. Well, let's add to it as we dive into it, as we dig into it for real. Project schedule. So I had, Sophie, if you have that document, that's project schedule, you can bring that up if you want to. We have a document that kind of lays out in general 18 months of work. And I want y'all to look at that because you can see when each different research, remember I said there's 6 different research. Oh yeah, here we go. So you can see on here what we plan to do in general each of the different months. And so take some time to dig into that. Again, I'm going to come back soon. We're going to talk about this in more detail. I know I'm downloading a lot for y'all today, but it kind of digs into each of what we're doing. We're going to get the studies, and sort of as you keep scrolling down, you'll see that, say we have like the case study review, that's going to come in month 5. Where we're going to have community consultation, the market analysis and vulnerability assessment, when we're going to do that. Right, but do you see there's also blank months? And we put those in there purposely because, again, we know y'all are going to ask for more research for us to do. We know that it's going to take time for y'all to really get these things, right? So not doing what we take months to study for y'all to get in 2 hours. So we're leaving a lot of flexibility within the schedule for new research, for to slow down, to dig a little bit deeper, right? To go over again, whatever what we need to do throughout this process. Right, each of these meetings are not fully scheduled to the brim, so that we can't, do those things as well between the months too. And so I just want to note that for y'all not to be shy about telling us to slow down, right? Or that you're probably doing what I'm doing, talk too fast, or talk through things too fast, and all those different things that I think are necessary for equitable decision making within it too. So I just wanted to point to that. I know y'all are going to probably have to take this document and really kind of look through it in more detail later about when we're going to talk about different things, right? Because it's not all going to be like, hey, we're going to be twiddling our thumbs for 6 months and everything's going to be dumped on y'all at once, right? We're going to work through all those things in time and sort of a schedule.
October, month 1.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. We do not have a fully executed contract yet, so the clock has not started for sure. But I think maybe, yeah, mid-October. It's not going to perfectly align with months, but
okay.
Maybe November will be the first full month for sure. Yeah. So maybe November's the month. I don't know. You have to talk to Dan and Sophia. They're telling me when I'm on the clock and it's time to go. So,
Catherine, I think October is the first month. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
As we start rolling, maybe the first half a month, maybe.
Yeah. I think that sounds right. So, our first order of business within this is getting that anti-displacement work group up and going. And we're beginning some of this research and really aligning with community around, is this the right research process? So those would be the first 3 things that happen before everything else kind of flows down from there. And that's more or less what is communicated in this document too. So
the work group that you're going to develop, do they report back to us, to the CMC? I mean, what does that structure look like?
That's a good question. So how I view it, and maybe this is a question maybe more for Sophia, ultimately the recommendation goes to the overall project team for the Blue Line, right? But we will of course be reporting both what y'all are saying to the anti-displacement work group in the times that we come to y'all, and we'll be communicating what the anti-displacement work group is saying to y'all too. So it's not necessarily, so there will be this feedback, and maybe something to think about is there may be some times where we have big meetings amongst all the advisory committees at once. Like maybe that's something that probably will, I would imagine, would happen at least a couple of times, so that y'all can have those conversations together. Like again, how to manage as big as a table as that might be. We definitely have strategies for doing that. But yeah, I think there will be times where y'all will be talking together, and then other times where y'all will be hearing from each other separately. But ultimately, the recommendation will be going to Hennepin County and the Met Council.
We've done many, joint BAC, CAC meetings in the past. I can see some things like that. We'll have we'll eventually bring stuff. C. Terrence will be doing a similar presentation to the Quarter Management Committee next week, and so they'll hear some of that, and so it'll be a variety of things, both in the community and at our formal committees. But ultimately, many of these things, here's so many of the recommendations that are made that are coming, that might come out of the Anti-Displacement Working Group are not necessarily project recommendations. So it doesn't mean that they should flow up through the CMC, but they would flow to us as a project team, and then we would need to facilitate that Minneapolis City Council or Hennepin County Board or wherever the best implementer of those recommendations might be.
I just wanted to know if C. Terrence would be the SPOC, so that we wouldn't miss out on the information. So is he the single point of contact, or to make sure live long and prosper, C. Terrence? So just want to make sure that we're in the loop if we're not necessarily part of that work group, so
And
we'll know what's going on.
Catherine, I think that is the commitment to the committees, is that as work advances and as information is happening, that it does come, that you do hear about it on an ongoing basis. And to Dan's point, there's CMC might not always be all the full channel, but the CMC also represents a lot of our policy stakeholders that are very interested in this work, and will be, especially from potentially the city's side, maybe taking some of it on. So we definitely want to keep them in the loop as well. And so there's a lot of coordination in this work to be had for sure. A lot of coalition building, right, and support building to be ultimately effective.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we're gonna be doing a lot of, I like Spock. I'm gonna call myself, what's my role in this project? I'm Spock.
Yeah.
Definitely be the carrying theme. We got a lot of work to do for sure. It's a lot. But this is what we love to do. We know this is what y'all have a self-interest in showing up for. And right, if you need one-on-one time, let's go get coffee. Let's talk about this, especially very early on in the project, because I want to deeply know, why y'all stepped up here, not just because this was a passive thing or a little thing happening to y'all. I'm sure y'all recognize how big the stakes are, and this is exactly from what I hear from Hennepin County and from the Met Council. Like, right, they want to do this better than anywhere else in the country, right? They're not just here. There's no, to what Dan said earlier and to what you're saying earlier, Catherine, the feds aren't making them do this, or right, the state's not making them do this. This is just, they wanted to do this because they thought it was the right thing to do. And so why not be the first to do this the right way, right? And so that's going to take a lot of hard work to do it, and that's what we're here for. My kid's got to be in the meeting, showing up, right? That's fine. Let's have the meeting. Let's talk and really dig into this.
That's right, C. Terrence. In a lot of ways, we're blazing some new trails here, and we want to be a model for nationally, a way to get this kind of work done.
Well, that's all I had to present, y'all. Again, I know this is not going to be the last time we talk. I'm sure we'll be talking very, very soon. And I'm serious. If you want to get coffee, go talk about this in more detail. Let's do it. My coffee budget's big, so we can go somewhere great. And again, I live in this quarter with y'all, so it's in my interest to get this right too. Right, I want to get this right for me and for my neighbors, and I'm just proud and honored to do this with all of you.
Sounds great. Dan, when are we gonna decide between West Broadway and Lowry?
Well, the goal is still to have that in the early part of 2022. So,
Okay.
and so that's a great transition, Catherine,
Mhm.
because thanks for that. You're so on top of it. Part of that is, what is what is part of how we're going to make that happen? And, part of that is led by going back to the project principles, the route ones, meeting new starts criteria and maintaining as close as possible to the existing alignment, mitigating negative impacts, and to really do community engagement that informs those principles and then bring those principles back to the community and continue that loop. As you can see, it's not just the Terrence who likes to make these circular slides that turn arrows around. We like to make those too. Sophia's very good at this. And it's all part of, because that's really how community engagement works, is you take feedback, you get feedback, you go do some work, you come back and you do it again. So these 6 project goals that are out there are the ones that we are going to use to to actually put both quantitative and qualitative measurements and evaluation criteria against. So, something big like, number 4, support communities' development goals. What kind of criteria will we use to say, how does Lowry support communities' development goals versus how does West Broadway support communities' development goals? We'll also apply these similar principles to the other areas in the corridor. So when we think of Robbinsdale, when we think of Crystal, even though we're not comparing to each other, we want to verify that the route we're selecting along Highway 81, for example, meets and will actually attain many of these project goals. So we'll want to do that as well. Does building LRT along 81 improve transit access and connections to jobs and regional destinations? So sometimes it's about, is what we're proposing meeting a goal? And in some cases, it's which route is a better identifier of meeting those goals. So I think the next slide shows an example of goal 1, which says improve transit access and connections to jobs and regional destinations. So what informs that is which routes maximize transit access to housing or jobs or healthcare facilities. So we've got destination maps that we're putting together where we can take a look at, here's an example of population density, and we can say, okay, if we blow it up and look at what happens along West Broadway, how many houses, how many residential properties are we serving along there versus how many are we serving on the Washington Lowry alignment? How do they compare against each other? And this is just one. This is just one of many of these. This one talks about lower and higher job density. So where you can see there's a large concentration of jobs, entry-level jobs, beginning jobs around West Broadway, Emerson, and Fremont, and then even more than 40,000 annually. So the West Broadway route has a high concentration of jobs, but then the Lowry Washington route has a higher concentration of jobs down near Washington and 10th and down in the North Loop area. So these are samples. And then, of course, North Memorial has a big piece there. Both routes serve along North Memorial, but that's one of the reasons why coming down 81 and connecting to North Memorial makes some sense for a transit line because it does that. So these are just a couple examples of these are a couple examples about how to measure and look at examples against goal 1. Goal 6 talks about advancing local and regional equity and working towards reducing regional racial disparities. This is a very important piece. So again, how do we identify opportunities to invest in historically disinvested communities? Where were examples of disinvestment in the past that investment can benefit? So we have a map here that goes along with this that identifies historic areas of redlining and racial covenants. And again, we can look at not only the entire alignment, but we can look at West Broadway and Lowry in terms of, are we able to now put transit and make an investment into areas that were previously areas of concentrated poverty and had disinvestment due to redlining and racial covenants. And then, of course, this work, while it helps inform the route, this work will also help inform C. Terrence and his group. I mean, they have lots of, probably way as much or more data even than we do in terms of things they can look at to help get after some of these areas.
So Dan, a quick question, is Washington only an option if you're going to Lowry? I mean, I know we're close to end of the meeting.
I mean, I don't know that I would say that fully. In other words, could we come up Washington, go across West Broadway, the West Broadway Bridge, and then go right onto West Broadway? Maybe. We think Lowry is the best. We think Washington Avenue is the best route to get us to Lowry if using Lowry as an east-west connection is fully desired. That I can say.
I mean, I understand that, but isn't it the best route to get to West Broadway? It passes West Broadway to get to Lowry. But anyway, I mean, we can talk about it later, but it just seemed like your example only showed that Washington.
We don't have the links with us today. I mean, I think the overall message is if we're going to Lowry is likely along Washington. If we're going to West Broadway, we have multiple options, whether kind of in that. And we do need to come back and talk more about the links as we get through.
One of our biggest, to follow up with Sophia said, if Lowry makes sense and the best way to get to Lowry is Washington Avenue, those two things are somewhat doable. The much harder piece is how do we get from Target Field Station to say to Washington and Plymouth? It's not easy. It's not easy with the way the North Loop is developed and availability of space. So it's fairly impactful. So that's a challenge we're facing as well. So here's another vehicle access, renter-occupied households. They're just samples of the many kinds of maps. And here, of course, we're corridor wide again. We have the entire corridor, and we can focus on, are we serving, residential, not only residential areas, but areas where vehicle access is limited. And of course, transit is more necessary in areas where vehicle access is limited.
So Dan, is this households looking now or looking at the development that's taking place?
These are measures, and I can't speak to exactly the data, but this is now. This is not, knowing what might happen with future development along here yet. Which of course is a whole nother analysis in those 6 goals, is which of these various routes has the potential to generate more potential community benefits if built. So
no, I was just curious because I know Ian and Tim, they have funding for their projects. So
and I think at least for now, Catherine, they're not represented here based on the fact that they're not currently in place.
I got you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in summary, I mean, that is that's just a little sneak peek of what will be coming out in the November timeframe. What'll be part of the data that we have available at the Minneapolis workshops. These evaluation pieces will be part of our report, and this will all be part of helping to guide us on where the recommendation is for both getting out of downtown, using a Lowry or West Broadway route, coming up to the Robbinsdale border, and then, you know, what it means to continue up 81 into Brooklyn Park.
So I'll kind of piggyback off of that a little bit, and we do need to kind of get more into the data with the committee. We just wanted, as we're pulling data together and maps, we just want you all to know the kind of what we're doing, right? And so as Dan kind of in our last community meeting started setting the table for, we learned from the release of the March reports that the community didn't like us just to drop a whole ton of information, say it was an official thing, and then wait for reaction. That folks wanted to be more part of the development that we're putting together into these documents. So the events that we have coming up in Robbinsdale and in Minneapolis, we already did Crystal, are really, in a lot of ways, what I like to call, it's not the right term, but it's kind of like almost like project disclosure. Like, let's talk about these major pieces of the project and what all this team is working towards and pulling together, and dig into the options and really get into what we're doing so that we can shape the report, the draft report together. And so we have some dates kind of lined up. Jason, the first one's for you. I should have emailed you earlier, but we got Elam Church on Wednesday, October 27th. Hope you can make that. I had asked the BAC if these dates conflict with other major community events that I might have missed. Just let me know. Elam also has another event at their campus today, but we're hoping that the two kind of work together nicely. So, you know, in Robbinsdale, you all saw North Memorial last month. The rest of the community hasn't. We need to talk about that, and just kind of general design advancements. So when people see this draft report, they know what we looked at Robbinsdale, how we evaluated those pieces, how we brought it all together. For Minneapolis, just the same. You know, there's a commitment from the staff is that we're going to bring out our work, and some of it is messy, and some of it's not complete, and some of it's stuff that we had to look at, but we want the community to see how we evolved not really evolved, but how we pulled together our thinking and all the options that we put together that really speak to those project goals that Dan laid out, to really kind of say what we're thinking is what does it align with what the community feels about this project and thinks about this project, so that we can advance a lot of what these workshops will have. Also it is things to work out within the next year. So while community needs these pieces of information to help inform what is the community supported alignment, a lot of it can be refined. So just anyways, as my child also busts into the house and noise starts around me, just want to get these dates out there with everybody. Just give me a second, bud. Okay, you want to wave real quick? Leo's saying hi to everybody. Okay, bye, Leo. Start getting these kind of on the calendar. We'll really engage a whole bunch to get people out. And also, there's a combination of for Minneapolis kind of events, but then also office hours. You know, there's a lot of businesses along the corridors, and that finding that like 15 minutes just to walk on over close to where they are and talk to us versus, you know, maybe taking a chunk out of their evening when they're busy or something is part of the program. So if you see anything wrong with any of these dates, major things I missed, let me know. But otherwise, we'll start getting this stuff out into the world just a little bit. Dan, did I miss anything?
No, I think that's key. I mean, we really think these workshops and office hours, and we really want to be available to the communities and this. I mean, we've done, as you know, we've done a lot of work We've done a lot of work in Robbinsdale. We've talked to a lot of people. We need to get better and more feedback from work going on in Minneapolis. And so we're hoping this is there. There's also an event we should bring up, the Juxta West Broadway bike roll, walk, somersault, whatever it is, event Saturday. So there's going to be a bus tour. There's going to be a walking tour. There's going to be a biking tour. I'm sure you could bring dogs and kids and whatever else you want. And then we're going to be right back at Juxta for a little Q&A after Saturday afternoon. I'll be there. Sophia will be there. We'll have various other more project staff doing different things, and hopefully we'll have a nice turnout.
So obviously time for discussion, but just as we're moving to the end, I have November 3rd asterisks on our meeting date. The BAC is moving from November 2nd to the 9th because November 2nd is a big day in some of our communities because it's election day. And we want to not take up people's time. We want them to be able to get out and vote. So I think this committee also, it might make sense to move also to the same week and be on November 10th. But that even though we're not, if you're like me, sometimes you like to stay up and watch election results fill in. You might be tired on November 3rd. So just wanna push that out for the group. Silence. Okay.
Should we all go take care of children? I don't have to take care of any, but maybe grandchildren. That would be it for me.
Well, it is after daylight savings kicks in, so.
That's when it gets dark about 2:30 in the afternoon, right?
Do we want to decide on this call about November 3rd to the 10th, or are we just saying we're doing that?
You guys generally like to piggyback them, right?
Yeah, that would be our recommendation. The CMC also has to slip because November 11th is Veterans Day. So it's kind of like a realigning of our committees a little bit. The 10th will kind of be in the middle of some of the community workshops. But we have multiple venues just to kind of get into November. The topic is really focused on Minneapolis and all those pieces of design that we need to wrap our hands around a little bit more. So it's a little bit kind of schedule gymnastics, but then you're not so far away from the CMC too in terms of space and time. I'll just take it as a generally agnostic about which day we do. We'll check with the co-chairs just to make sure the date works for one of you for sure.
Well, I think Sophia, we're recommending this needs to move.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good enough.
Let's go with that.
Okay.
Sophia may not be that bold. I'm bold to say we're moving it. Yes.
Thanks, Dan. We're good. It's all good.
Cool. Okay. Well, you know where to find us. If there's questions in the meantime, we will get out all the presentation material from tonight to the committee, and we'll look forward to both advancing our technical work and seeing a whole bunch more of C. Terrence and the rest of the CURA team in the months to come. So Jason, if it feels ready, feel free to motion to adjourn.
Yeah, I think we're adjourning the meeting. I don't need motions. We're just gonna say it's over.
Say we're adjourning the meeting. Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
You're the chair. You call it over. We're done.
Okay.
Well, thanks everybody who joined us. Thanks. I mean, it's exciting work we got coming up, and November's going to be big. Sophia, we just want to, encourage as much participation in November as we can. I know that's hard as activities are busy, but, we'll do the best we can.
Well, and also thank you to C. Terrence and the work you're doing, and also just presenting to us and answering our questions. So looking forward to working with you.
Me too. Looking forward to it as well.
Thanks
so
everybody.
much.
Have a good night.
Maybe a
Thanks,
meeting
everyone.
at
Bye.
Maybe a meeting at Pig Ate My Pizza sometime.
Oh,
Okay,
that's
I'm
always
in. I'm in for